The first time I saw him, he looked like trouble, the kind of trouble that smells like cigarettes, heartbreak, and bad decisions. And damn, I wanted every piece of it. It was the middle of autumn in Crestmont, a quiet town nobody ever leaves or remembers. I'd just finished another dull shift at the bookstore when he walked in, a stranger with ocean eyes and a smirk that could start a war. He asked for a job. My boss said no. He didn't care. He just leaned on the counter, looked at me and said, "Guess I'll find another reason to stay then." That was the beginning of my downfall. His name was Eli Walker. Mine's Noah Green. And if there's one thing I've learned about love, it never asks for permission before it ruins you. Eli moved into the apartment across the hall from mine 2 days later. I could hear his music through the walls, old rock songs. Loud, unapologetic. Sometimes, I'd hear him singing along, low and rough, like gravel on silk. The first time I knocked to complain, he opened the door shirtless, grinning like he already knew he'd won. "Hey neighbor," he said, leaning against the doorframe. "You don't look like someone who hates good music." "I don't," I replied, "but I hate not sleeping." He laughed, a deep, careless sound that made my pulse trip. "I'll keep it down," he promised. "Only if you let me buy you coffee tomorrow." And just like that, I stopped caring about sleep. Crestmont wasn't kind to people like me. I learned early that the town had a way of suffocating anyone who didn't fit its mold. The stares, the whispers, the quiet judgment behind every "nice to see you." So I kept my head down, played the part, and told myself I didn't need anyone. But Eli, he didn't play by anyone's rules. He talked too loud, laughed too freely, and looked at me like I was the only person in the world worth his time. Terrified me, and maybe that's why I couldn't stay away. We became friends, or something that pretended to be friendship while hovering dangerously close to something else. He'd drop by after work with takeout and cheap beer. We'd sit on the rooftop, watching the lights fade over the ocean. Some nights, he'd tell me stories about cities he'd run from, about people who'd loved him too much or not enough. And some nights, he'd just sit there in silence, eyes distant, like he was somewhere I couldn't reach. Once, I asked him why he came to Crestmont. He stared at the horizon for a long time before answering. "Because I wanted to stop running," he said softly. "And because you looked like someone who could make me want to stay." I didn't know what to say to that, so I didn't. Instead, I laughed it off, changed the subject, and pretended my heart wasn't beating itself to death in my chest. But feelings, real ones, have a way of slipping through the cracks no matter how hard you try to seal them. It started with small things. The way his hand brushed mine when he passed me a beer, how his gaze lingered a little too long, how he'd say my name like it meant something. One night, when rain poured like it was trying to wash the world away, he showed up at my door soaked to the bone, trembling, a bruise on his cheek and blood on his knuckles. "Don't ask," he muttered. "Can I stay here tonight?" I didn't ask. I just pulled him in, handed him a towel, and watched as he fell asleep on my couch shirtless again, hair sticking to his forehead, lips parted slightly. Something in me cracked that night. I wanted to protect him, even if I didn't understand from what. The next morning, he made pancakes in my kitchen like he'd lived there his whole life. "Thanks," he said quietly, "for last night." I wanted to say for what, but the word stuck, because I knew. For not asking, for not judging, for just being there. Weeks passed. We became inseparable. Everyone in town noticed, of course. The stares followed us sharp, disapproving, cutting through every moment we tried to have. My boss at the bookstore hinted that I should be careful who I hang around. My father called from Denver, asking why I hadn't visited lately. I lied, said work was busy. Truth was, I didn't know how to explain Eli to anyone. I barely understood him myself. Then came the night everything changed. We were at the pier, same as always. The wind was cold, biting, but neither of us cared. He'd brought a bottle of whiskey and 2 cups. We drank, laughed, argued about music, life, and everything in between. And when I turned to look at him, really look, it hit me how much he'd become part of my world. "Eli," I said, my voice quieter than the waves. "What are we doing?" He looked at me for a long time before answering, his expression unreadable. "I don't know," he whispered. "But whatever it is, I don't want it to stop." And then, without thinking, without breathing, I kissed him. The world didn't end. The ocean didn't explode. It was just him and me, salt, wind, and something that felt like freedom. When I pulled back, he smiled, small, fragile, real. "I was hoping you'd do that," he said, voice trembling. "Because if you didn't, I was going to." The next day, he was gone. No note, no message. Nothing but silence and an empty apartment across the hall. I knocked until my knuckles bled. I called. I waited. Days turned into weeks. The town felt smaller, colder. Every corner reminded me of him: the bookstore where he'd tease me, the rooftop where he'd hum songs under his breath, the pier where we'd stolen that kiss. I didn't know it then, but the truth about Eli Walker was darker than I ever imagined. 3 months. That's how long it took for the silence to become unbearable. Crestmont felt emptier without him. Every sound, every shadow, every stranger passing by reminded me of the boy with the leather jacket and the restless soul who'd turned my life into a storm and vanished before I could even tell him he'd changed me. Then one morning a letter arrived. No return address. Just my name in his handwriting. "Noah, I didn't mean to disappear. I just had to face something I'd been running from for years. You deserve honesty, and I didn't have that in me then. I'm sorry. If you still want to know the truth, meet me at the pier this Friday at sunset." My hands shook as I read it. Part of me wanted to tear it apart. The other part, the one that never stopped hoping, was already on its way to the pier. The sunset painted the ocean in shades of gold and rose when I saw him again. He looked thinner, older somehow, but his eyes, those impossible blue eyes, still held that spark that once made me forget how to breathe. "I didn't think you'd come," he said quietly. "I almost didn't." My voice cracked. "You left without a word, Eli." He nodded, staring at the waves. "I know. I screwed up." The wind whipped between us, sharp with salt and memory. He took a step closer. "I was arrested 2 years ago in Chicago," he said suddenly, "for theft. I was on probation when I came here. My record followed me everywhere, so I ran. I thought maybe, if I started over, I could be someone else." I stared at him, stunned, angry, heartbroken, everything at once. "So all of it, the lies, the silence—" "It wasn't lies," he interrupted, voice trembling. "It was fear. I didn't want you to see me the way the world does, as some lost cause. But when you kissed me that night, it felt too real, too good. Panicked. I thought if I stayed, I'd ruin you too." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The sound of the waves filled the spaces between our hearts. Then I said, "You did ruin me." He flinched. "But you also made me alive again," I continued. "You can't just walk back and expect me to forget everything." "I'm not asking you to forget," he said softly. "I'm asking you to forgive. The thing about forgiveness is it doesn't happen in one breath. It's a choice, 100 small ones made over and over again." So I told him, "I don't know if I can forgive you tonight." He nodded, eyes glistening. "Then I'll keep showing up until you can." And he did. Eli came back to Crestmont for good. He got a job fixing boats at the dock, started paying off what he owed, and slowly, people began to see him not as a ghost of his mistakes, but as a man trying to make things right. We didn't jump back into love, not right away. We rebuilt it quietly, one conversation, one late-night walk, one apology at a time. Sometimes we'd sit on the pier again, drinking cheap coffee instead of whiskey. He'd hum old songs, and I'd lean my head against his shoulder, letting the sound of the ocean remind me that some things, even broken ones, can still be beautiful. One night, months later, I found him painting the walls of his small apartment. There was a soft playlist in the background. The air smelled like fresh paint and pine. He turned when I entered, his smile shy. "Didn't think you'd come." "I told you," I said. "I'm not running anymore." We stood there, facing each other, two people who'd lost everything, yet somehow found their way back. He reached out, brushing a streak of paint off my cheek with his thumb. "You know," he murmured, "when I first met you, I thought you were too good for me. And now Now I know we're both just human and that's better. Then he kissed me slow, certain, like he'd finally stopped running. The world didn't care about our love. The town still whispered. Some people still stared. But somewhere along the line, I stopped trying to explain us. Because love doesn't need to be explained, only lived. We found our rhythm. Mornings with coffee and laughter. Evenings on the pier. Quiet nights where the only thing between us was warmth and silence. Eli kept a small notebook by the window. Sometimes I'd find sketches of boats, waves, or always me drawn with soft, uncertain lines. I never asked why. I didn't need to. One morning he handed it to me. Inside was a short note. For the boy who saw light in all my broken places. You didn't just make me stay. You made me believe. I looked up at him, and for the first time in years, I realized how much peace looked like his smile. 2 years later, the bookstore closed, and I moved into a little house near the coast. Eli built shelves with his own hands, filled them with secondhand books and half-finished dreams. We named the place the Lighthouse not because it was tall or bright, but because it was where we found our way back to each other. Sometimes kids from town would come by, asking about the strange pair who ran the cozy bookshop by the sea. Eli would laugh, tell them, "We're just a couple of idiots who refuse to give up." And maybe that's exactly what we were. Because love isn't about perfection, it's about choosing each other, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. On nights when the tide's high and the wind howls through the cracks, we still go out to the pier. The same spot where it all began. He wraps his arm around me. The same way he did that first night we kissed, and whispers, "Still think I'm trouble?" I smile, leaning into him. "Always. But you're my kind of trouble." And as the waves crash below us, I realize something. The boy who once turned my world upside down didn't steal my heart. He taught it how to beat again. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe to stay updated with the latest videos.